Hello, everyone. I am Daniela Garcia, and welcome again to a new edition of Encora Talks. For this opportunity, we will be talking about legacy service modernization, four pillars to succeed. We have an amazing expert with us today. His name is Lucas Romaris. He has been helping organizations modernize their legacy core applications for more than 14 years. He holds a bachelor's degree in game engineering and has a solid foundation in modern web services. With a track record of leading software development teams for over 9 years, Lucas is a seasoned professional in the field. Hello, Lucas. We're thrilled to have you here and welcome to Ancora Talks.
All right, thank you, Danny. Thanks for the opportunity. All right, folks. So let's get started. So, like Danny said, I'd like to welcome our Incorians, clients, and friends. My name is Lucas Rovares. People know me by Rovares here at the company. Like she said, I have a degree in game engineering, and as of today, I have roughly 14 years of development experience. And the past 10 years was solely with web services, and I'm with Encora as an engineering manager for the past 5 years now. So today we're going to talk about legacy service modernization, the business challenges that comes with that, the pitfalls you might find while tasked with one of these projects, how to avoid them, and a consolidated approach on the right angle to go about it. We'll not be discussing objective approaches, as objective solutions would require extra context and code to go over. So the idea of this presentation here, of this session, is to go over on a high level on how this should work. And yeah, that's the main goal. Um, and yeah, so let me start. The business challenges that will make a company want to modernize their legacy services, right? And the first thing I would like to talk about is what is a legacy migration in nature. Like in nature, um, a legacy migration is getting old services and code and make them available to the new infrastructure a company might be building, and getting features and functionality to their end customers in a manner that is maintainable, safe, and works for the company. Reasons why a company would like to migrate all legacy services into the new ones vary a lot. It might be because they want to ship new features, functionality to their customers, and they're not being able to. High maintenance costs of legacy services, they stack up and through time might add up considerably. Struggles with system operability. So now, if you're trying to spin up a new venture, a new vertical of business, and wants to integrate with a legacy service that already exists, that might be too costful for you. And overall, inefficient usage of resources, allocations. It's hard to keep talent working on legacy services as well. So there's a lot of reasons why a company would like to migrate their existing legacy services into a new architecture. And when doing so, you might find a lot of pitfalls along the way. And this might give you cues on things that you should look for and be extremely careful on how to do it. So if you're looking at one of these projects and find that documentation is out of date, as an example, that people that were owners, code owners of a particular part of the system have left the company. If you find bugs within the legacy system that were perceived as working on features that are actually not, if you find that a particular bigger company serving a lot of customers doesn't have any sort of quality assurance safeguards in place, data models that are not very well thought out, these are all cues that you have to know that, there might be pitfalls ahead of you. Um, so The approach we're going to take here, we're going to imagine here a general scenario, which is a little bit typical in our experience. So imagine for a moment that we have high growth startup with thousands of customers, and our mission will be to help them modernize their legacy systems into new ones. And imagine that these legacy systems, if anything goes up and the service goes down, it will affect the ability of that company of making business, right? So there will be a revenue effect there. And also, let's imagine for a second that that migration has, at some level, has started, and there's an understanding that some of the work was already done. A typical approach on one of these would be to, get the most knowledge we can with the resources we have at the time, trying to map all dependencies on the services we're trying to migrate. We're going to have to make sure all data existing on the legacy services will also be migrated with 100% fidelity to the new ones. We might need to migrate business logic as well, which lives in the legacy services, into the new ones. We might find that features that were allegedly working might not be working as it was initially intended. So while migrating, you might find yourself having to rewrite business logic within these legacy services. And you might have to adjust all consumers of these legacy services, the services that talk to them, to consume from the new ones. You might need to fix bugs immediately because if you're migrating functionality that is fault in nature, eventually the feature itself on the new system, its working condition, it's going to be on you. So you might as well fix all bugs you find immediately. And you might have to take only calculated risks, depends on the impact area of the things you're touching within that company infrastructure. So to that end, since this is kind of these days recurrent, right? These projects come and go very often. We try to consolidate a very direct approach on how to tackle these on the right angle every time, and we're able to come up with 4 pillars that we think are critical for the team to, look upon when imagining how to migrate and how to work on these legacy services, getting them into production on the new architecture. So those 4 pillars would be team. So the things you need to consider within the team you have and you're a part of. What are the things that are important that our team members know, and how can we make the best use of our time and expertise across the team? Quality, it's another fundamental pillar here, because quality is what our customers, our stakeholders, going to judge our service upon. So quality is quite critical here. Productivity wise, right? Because usually these projects comes with a time frame or expectations, at least in time and timelines. So we need to have a pretty refined way of knowing how much we're progressing to forecast productivity and be able to give ETAs and the likes. And finally, and I think personally the most important of the pillars is stakeholder management. Here's where we make sure that whoever contracted with us is always aware and part of the decisions, and trusts us in making the best calls, and trusts us in our judgment to make some calls and decisions while migrating, because invariably those will come. There will times that we'll need to make a decision that will affect how the new infrastructure is going to work and how we're going to have to go about it, migrating the legacy ones into the new one. The first pillar would be the team, right? So imagine they're working with a company like one of those big companies, and they have this myriad of services with multiple languages, frameworks, perhaps a lot of microservices. And within your team, you might not have the whole expertise to be able to work on all of those systems that need to be migrated. So what can you do when you first land on a project like this? The first thing we need to know is exactly what we're going to be migrating in terms of technology. stacks, and what kind of level of experience we'll need in each and every one of those. One approach that really works is making people within the team kind of responsible of understanding each services. If you have a lot of them to migrate, and they will become sorts of the advocate for that system. So whenever we're trying to migrate a functionality of one of them, there will be someone with the team who would be responsible of knowing exactly how the business logic works there, how the project itself works, how it's run, how do we test it, how do we safely deploy a solution, things like that, and have everyone on the team being owner of a part of the migration. And once we're able to get people on the team to be on that position, then we can start knowledge transfer, all the things that we learn, and that way bringing the whole team up to a point where everyone can work and everything. Um, the first moment that you find that there are expertise gaps within yourself or someone with the team, we need to address them immediately. So let me give a practical example. So let's say we have a JavaScript service, and we might need to um, work on releasing it on multiple tenants or multiple regions, and no one on the team knows how to do that. And since it's going to be critical for the development process, because we're going to be delivering small chunks in iterations of the migration, it's fundamental that we identify that we have that gap, and we can find the right tooling or courses or any sort of material that the team might need to be able to perform their work effectively. And one other thing, as to respect to teams, that I think it's very important, and we agreed upon, is that when we are tasked with these kind of projects, it's very daunting most of the time because of the sheer size of it. So imagine you have two or three services that are critical to the business. You're here and there making changes there, and if they're critical and if they break, that might mean that that particular businesses might not be able to operate. So there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. One way of easing that pressure and make sure everyone is feeling good about being part of the project is ensuring that all tasks that is to be executed done throughout the project are small enough so one person can develop, test, and verify the changes and can get very constant wins every day, every week, every sprint. It's very important for the team to build confidence and knowing for a fact that their changes are landing safely and with quality, and making sure that all the way you're going to divide the work that needs to be done accounts for this closed loop of successful deliveries. That builds a lot of confidence within the team, and it's very, very important. So the second pillar here, as of our quality, if you found one of those pitfalls that I mentioned before, lack of QA, documentation might be out of date, features that were supposed to be working are not. The best thing you could do the best thing a team can do is assume that nothing works properly. And why is that? That is important because that will make as a requirement that you test the code and understand all the side effects of the things you are working with. You have invariably to deeply understand how the systems work to be able to properly test the changes you're landing in production and make sure that no unintended effects arose from that deploy. If you have a lot of separate services, in addition to the legacy, you might need to map their communication if there's no good documentation about it. One thing that is very good to have, but is not often the case, is like a complete architecture diagram on how the systems are working. Not all companies have that. So in the absence of that kind of documentation, it's fundamental that to ensure quality, we're able to successfully map how the services talk to each other. What are the protocols they're using? What are the common verbs in the case of RESTful endpoints and things like that. You can do that using logs. There are a myriad of tooling you can use to achieve that kind of mapping. And it's really important. If you're working on a big company and other teams are working on different systems, the new ones or legacy ones as well, it's important trying to engage them in verifying the changes that were done in the services they're responsible for. This is a arrangement that happens here and there, where a team tasked with migrating legacy services and code to a new one also have to affect those changes on services that they don't own. So having the team that is officially the owner of a given service, being the quality assurance of your changes, will dramatically increase quality, because those guys, those people will have the domain knowledge of the things you're migrating, right? So they will be best positioned to ascertain if a problem is there or not. Another thing that is important, in our opinion, is to break epic. So whenever you're trying to get a sense of the whole scope of work we need for a given part of the migration, it's important, we believe, to break those tasks into end-to-end features to avoid having silos within the parts of the team. So an example of that is if we're moving a legacy service that deals with user registration, and there's a user registration UI, and we want to migrate that to a new service, it would be nice to map that epic of moving the legacy user registration service to the new one, accounting for not only the backend, the data part of it, the security part of it, but also the front end part of it, where the end user would be using. That way, you're always going to be testing end to end everything that was migrated, and we'll be able to verify if the behavior you're seeing it is indeed the expected, and that helps in maintaining quality. If you're in an environment that there's not enough monitoring, meaning you don't know exactly when things break and why and who and when, if you find yourself in that position while doing a migration like this, we highly indicate that you build the proper tooling to monitor, and at least on the first phases of migration should be logging everything. That way you'll be able to quickly, or let me say, you'll be able to find issues faster, being having where to look. And if you don't have the proper monitoring in place, you won't be able to do that. You'll be most of the time guessing what the problem is and why is that, and why a behavior that was expected is not happening. So having the proper tooling for monitoring in place is critical. And if you found on your environment that there's not enough documentation, every step along the way where you migrate something, be sure to document the latest version of how things work, what are the behaviors, and what is accounted for. So in the future, if there's any maintenance needed to be done on this code, other engineers will have a much easier job at understanding how that system works and where exactly a change required needs to be done, right? And if you have in your company a product department, you might as well leverage them to be the quality assurance. After all, product departments within these companies are responsible for the experience and the success of the product. Having them validating the features and the experience that the user have is completely reasonable. And I would say it's sometimes even expected. The third pillar on one of these migrations would be productivity. And this is important because depending on the sheer amount of services we need to migrate, the amount of pressure that the team might be undertaking, productivity is fundamental, so the stakeholders know that we're making progress, that the team itself knows that we're making progress, and that we're not stuck with things that we don't have a good answer for. So ensuring productivity, it ties everything together. It makes sure that the team is moving forward on a constant pace, and that the clients who reach out for us for help knows that that as well they can see the progress evidently. So in order to better enhance the productivity aspect of one of these migrations, you could look through the organization you're working with, the client, and see if there are people on the engineering team, as an example, who wants to collaborate with other teams or with your team on the migration. It's very common that engineers want to get rid of a legacy code and work on new architectures. And once these projects come along, a lot of people, and this we saw this, a lot of engineers would volunteer and help into getting some of these services migrated because it's been a pain for so much time that would gladly help faster. Um, we should always try to also identify key people within either the team itself or within the broader engineering team of a client who are the domain experts, because invariably at the end of the day those are the people who have the answers you're looking for. Being the domain expert of a given service means that they will know exactly the reasoning that was used into making decisions that affected changes in the code base. Having someone that can lay out exactly the thought process of how a given feature was built is very helpful. Sometimes we'll make a work that will take a week, take a couple of hours, just because we have the reasoning aspect of a code that we have to migrate, right? One other thing for productivity that is key, I think, is whenever we have something on our sprint, let's say, to be executed, the more well laid out that task is with requirements, what is our definition of them, what we're expecting out of that activity, having that documented and everyone on the team having them understanding these will dramatically increase productivity, because at the moment a developer, a collaborator will get one of these tests to do, there won't be any questions lingering, there won't be any uncertainty. So the more tasks you can write down perfectly, the less the less friction you're going to have while coding these, which is very helpful. And this is a little bit more technical and objective, but like overall, if you have any sort of mechanism to allow for the migration of small chunks of a legacy service, as opposed to do a big bang approach where you rewrite everything, that always is preferable. I mentioned here feature flags because it's very helpful. Not only a functionality would only work when this flag is enabled, but also if you deploy something that is faulty and you need to quickly be able to roll back, you just need to turn that flag off and go about dealing with any consequences that happen with that faulty deployment. So this is a very good approach in ensuring productivity. It also reduces the splash effect that a faulty change coming into production might do. So very important. And the fourth pillar, which I think is the most important one, is stakeholder management. So stakeholder management here, and this is not only for migration, the migration kind of work, but like in general in our business, stakeholder management is fundamental. Stakeholder management is what's going to assure us that we have a trusting relationship. And a trusting relationship would allow us to be faster, objective, and will allow us to make decisions and know that the stakeholders that are going to be receiving this work will trust us that that was the right decision at the time. Well, everyone makes mistakes, but we go off the base that we have the best interest at the company, the best interest of the product, and we took a decision with a calculated risk at a given time. And even if that goes sideways, we'll be able to explain why, reason, and we'll be all within what is reasonable from us. After all, we're the ones being tasked with migrating core critical legacy systems to a new one. So we might as well be considered the experts in doing so. One other thing, especially at the beginning of this project, if you can find any low-hanging fruits that can cause positive impacts, do it, because there's nothing better for a client, for a stakeholder, than being let know that a problem that was happening for a long time was fixed just because you glanced your eyes on it. That will build a great sense of trust, and the stakeholder will know uh, how to how to reason about it. Another thing that is important, we should be able to inform any stakeholders like product managers, VPs of engineering, directors at our earliest convenience whenever something that was expected turned out not to be that way. So if you found a problem and you need to make a decision now that's going to have broad range repercussion, make sure to bring those people into discussion as soon as possible and make them part of the decision. And when these things happens, you always got to be prepared to bring to the table at least a couple of options. Three, I think, would be ideal, and make sure to voice out what is the team's recommendation. We need to make sure that the stakeholders have the opportunity to make a change, to make a decision. After all, there are the stakeholders of what we're doing, but they also need to know what are the pros and cons with that. So when they make the decision or they make the decision with us, either case they're gonna be buying in the decision alongside us. So even if that goes sideways for any reason whatsoever, they're gonna be co-responsible with that, and then we're just gonna work and fix it whatever needs to be fixed, right? And the same thing for whenever there's a blocker in the team. It's always good to involve stakeholders and ask them what are the best approach here given the options that we have. And here at the end, here we got one testimonial from one of our clients. It was a CTO. The way we've went about it, we were able to complete one of these very complex migrations with 5 people in 8 months. We migrated over 1,000 of our customers into the new service, more than 4 and 5 legacy service in different stacks, and we've done so without an incident, without breaking anything, and it was a flawless experience. We hope that you all, when doing this kind of projects, can find the same results. And I think that's pretty much it for this short session. Questions?
Lucas, thank you so much for all the information you have provided us and shared with us. We are now ready to start with our Q&A section, as you just mentioned. The first question I have for you is, how does code become legacy code?
That's a good one. Okay, let me make a provocation here. How much code, like for the people in the audience, how much code have you written in the past 5 years, if you have that time of experience, that didn't became tech debt? It's a funny one. Our industry moves so fast that every now and then we'll have critical updates and resources we need to work on and bring them up to speed. New approaches comes into play to old business problems, which would require different solutions. Therefore, I think it's almost inevitable in most cases that code in general becomes legacy. It's just a fact of life. 5 years from now, all we're doing will probably be outdated, and there will be new tools, or at least new versions of the tools we're using today that we should be employing while developing. So all code, I think, invariably becomes legacy code. It's just a question of how much are we willing to spend maintaining them.
Thank you, Lucas. The second question is, where we draw a line and say that it's better to start fresh instead of trying to migrate to existing legacy code?
Yeah, I don't think we as engineers can draw that line honestly, because I don't think it's a engineering problem, to be honest. Um, like, we can have pretty much any service of any age running up in production today. We can use old versions of software. The only difference is that it's going to cost a lot of money to maintain that code, right? So I think it's ultimately to the business to decide if we should be investing more money into something new that might cost fewer dollars to maintain, right? Or if we're trying to build something new, it might take a very long time to do it because we're using one of these. So I think it all comes down to how the business would like to go about it. And yeah.
Thank you again, Lucas. And the last one. How to properly voice concerns and problems one might face during a complex migration of a legacy service.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is very important. We as engineers, we have the responsibility of understanding the complexity we're dealing with and properly voicing the concerns and risks we might have while doing it. I think one of the best ways of voicing such concerns is first to understand the audience of the people you're going to be talking to. Like, an executive or upper management might not need the tiny little details of what is going on, but they'll need the context of what's happening, the effects that that has, and there are what are the outcomes that they can expect on these efforts. So they should have that. But like, if you're talking to an architect, for him to be able to help you, you will have to go dive into the line, like within the little details. So you need to understand who you're talking to first. And once the context will lay down to the audience, you'll have to present options that are available that you guys came up with. And like I said before, I think you should have at least three. Two is okay, but three is, shows that you put a lot of effort on it, and voice what your recommended option is. And if the stakeholder finds that that is not the best option, totally fine. We'll go with what the business wants. We're sharing the responsibility and sharing the blessed radius of a faulty or of a problem with the company that hires us to do that. And that will allow the stakeholders to buy into the decision making process and being co-responsible for it. So I think that's the best way of approaching and voicing those concerns. And it could be like as simple as that. Listen, we have a problem. This is what we thought it was. It wasn't like that. Here's how it is. These are the options. Option number one has this as pro, this as co. Option number two, this pro, this con. Option number three, this pro, this con. We think the best option is option two. And now, what do we do? And then you talk and reach an agreement and go with that. And next sprint.
Thank you. Thank you again, Lucas. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please keep an eye out for more webinars that we will be hosting soon. We also invite you to watch the recorded webinars we have posted on talks.encora.com. Thank you again.
Thanks.